Today we're talking about procedural generation and the possibility that we are living in a simulation. I was walking down the street looking at all the hotels in the business district, and I was thinking about how they're all basically the same. They have different labels, different brands, but the truth is there's such similarity there, it's really hard to say that you would have a different experience by going to a different one. And we see the same style of repetition in supermarkets, retail chains, fast food restaurants. If you've seen one McDonald's or Target or Walmart, you've pretty much seen them all. And it's interesting how, whether we're talking about the repetition of corporate chains or even the repetition in nature, you look at the trees in the forest and you'd find that they all have a similar structure. If you've seen one flower, well, every flower is going to be designed in a way that's suspiciously similar. Then I was thinking about how in video games there's procedural generation, where you can create infinite content. We see this in games like No Man's Sky, for example, or Elite Dangerous, where you can travel pretty much forever. Elite Dangerous has a one-to-one replica of the entire galaxy. And yet, if you're playing that game, you'll realize quickly that once you've seen a little bit of it, you've basically seen it all, because the same assets are basically reused over and over again. The same procedure for generating content is repeating itself again and again. So you'll start to quickly have that feeling that it's a galaxy wide but a puddle deep. There's just not much content because it's the same content, just reordered and presented again in a slightly different way, but really it's the same thing at its core. And so then we look out into space in real life and we see, maybe it's possible to go to faraway places at the distant reaches of space. I like to think that that's the case. But if you were playing a video game, you'd have a lot of detail in the parts of the game world where you're supposed to be going. And then around the edges, you'd have a lot of places where there's not so much detail because you're not actually going to ever go there. And sometimes I think it seems like that's how space is. We look off into the far reaches of space as much as we possibly can, and we see the possibility that there's something out there. We can see these faraway lights in the blackness of space, but we can't get there. And so do we really know that there's other habitable worlds, that there's other places that are interesting and vibrant with life in the same way our current world here on Earth is? And we can hypothesize about these things, but we, as of yet, have not been able to reach out there to go and see for ourselves. Which goes back to that hypothesis that we're living in a simulation, that we're basically inside some sort of a virtual reality video game. And maybe that's not exactly how it is, but I do think it's a bit like that. Maybe that's just a way of explaining the world, to gamify our existence. But you can't really say that life isn't like a video game, because it's very much like a video game. And at a certain point, it kind of doesn't matter whether you say that it's a case of art imitating life or life looking like art. The same takeaway is there to be had, the same truth is there to be learned. And that truth is that if you want to win the game, the best way to do it is to enjoy the experience and not take it too seriously. Because in any game, if you're trying to reach endgame in a procedurally generated world, to get to the end of a treadmill which is designed to have no end, you'll be disappointed, because no matter how much you try to strain against the boundary, no matter how much you try to reach the end of the highest level, or complete the final content, all you'll ever find is more questions that don't have answers. People try to explain life with faith and with all sorts of different mechanics. But even if you say that God is the reason, well, then why God? You see, everything we could possibly do to explain our existence and our place in this thing we call life leads to a truth which we cannot escape. And that truth is that there's more we don't know than there is which we understand. And yet, throughout all of our existence, there is a hint that there's more to our existence than what meets the eye, that there is some sort of a global higher level of design which has created and regulated the rules which govern the styles and the implements of our world. And you can say that's God, or you can say that that's the laws of science. It doesn't really matter what you use as a label to explain that unknown, which, even if it is explainable, exists beyond the realm of what we are able to comprehend. And yet, I think regardless of who we are, there is a opportunity to have a sense of faith, to understand that even if we do not understand it, there is enough of a body of evidence for us to believe that we have a purpose which is greater than ourselves, and a purpose which makes this adventure which we're on something we can find meaning in, even if we lack complete understanding. I'm reminded of a quote from A River Runs Through It. At the end of that movie, a sermon was given, and the preacher said, sometimes we don't know what part of ourselves to give. And sometimes the part of ourselves that we have to give is also not wanted. And yet, he said in conclusion, it is possible to love completely without complete understanding. So, regardless of whether we totally get it or not, whether we see clearly or perhaps rather through a glass darkly, we still can love our lives and have a complete experience as we interact with life's journey. Wherever you find yourself, I hope you have a wonderful journey as well. Till next time, thank you for watching.